Hello humans, ArtistWithAfro here, and welcome back to the show. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a deck profile that I've been kind of working on and thinking about making. This is a dual engine deck profile of Nordics and Fortune Ladies. I'm going to go over some of the cards as well as the extra deck and then explain some of the strategy as well. So to get started, we'll start off first with the monsters and we'll go from there. Alright, to start off first, you're going to be running 3 Dverg, or 3 Dwarves of the Nordic Alfar. This is kind of one of the basic cards that you're going to be using to summon your Link monster. When he's normal summoned, he sort of acts like a marauding captain, allowing you to summon another Nordic monster or himself from your hand. So he does set up other combos, but generally you're going to be summoning him and immediately sending him to the graveyard. You might summon another one if you need to go for Slacker Magician, but it'll rarely be that sort of case in regards to this deck. Moving on to the next monster that we have, I'll let the camera focus. We have 1 Vanadis of the Nordic Ascendant. Now, Vanadis is a very interesting card, mainly because she's the first tuner that I'm going to show you guys here. Her ability allows you to send 1 Nordic monster from your deck to the graveyard, and she can change her respective level to match that monster's level as well. Again, she'll be used sort of to set up your combo. She opens up the variety of allowing you to synchro summon for either Thor or Odin, but if you do need sort of that extra monster just to synchro with, she's kind of going to be the main card that you're going to be using. Aside from that, if you do synchro summon with her, you have to have other Nordic monsters be the materials, and that all kind of works in tandem again with the Link monster. Moving on to the first new card of the set, and we're running a 3 stack of Alvis of the Nordic Alfar. This is going to be your sort of your safety net per se. This card's going to save you in the case of one of your Nordic synchros getting removed from the field, and it's going to allow you to bring another Nordic monster from your extra deck and special summon it. Now, his first ability you'll probably never use because it's very specific. You have to banish him only with a Nordic Link monster's effect. Then you have to send 1 Nordic monster you control and 2 Nordic monsters from your deck to the graveyard to special summon another Aesir monster. So essentially you have to basically have him, let's say Vanadis, and another Nordic monster on the field. You send him to the grave, and then you send one of these 2 alongside 2 others from your deck. So you're probably never going to use that first effect. If anything, he's really just there to be sent to the graveyard to set up for his second effect, which again says that when he's in the graveyard, you can banish him to special summon 1 Nordic monster from your extra deck. Once per duel though, so although we are running him at 3, keep in mind you can only use his effect once per duel. Moving on to the next tuner that we have, we run 3 Svaltov of the Nordic Alfar. Again, basic bread and butter, 5-star stack. I originally ran him as the main engine, but I figured I was going to put in Vanadis just to sort of open up the opportunity to summon the other Nordic monsters. And again, pretty basic. When he's normal summoned, he just allows you to get 1 Nordic monster from your graveyard and add it to your hand. You're probably never going to normal summon him, like I mentioned before, but you can also use him if you need to summon the Link monster Gulveg, which we will get to a little bit later. Moving on to the first monster of the second type of, I guess, engine of the deck. You're going to be running 3 Fortune Lady Lights. She is kind of your bread and butter for Fortune Lady decks. If anyone is unfamiliar with what she does, basically every turn she gains a star. Her stars are sort of chained to her attack, so she gains 200 for each star that she has. When she's removed from the field, and this is not including tributing, but when she's removed from the field, you get to special summon 1 Fortune Lady from your deck. So she is used a lot, mainly for the field spell, which will come in handy, but there are also a lot of other cards that we'll be releasing for Americans in July, and those cards are really going to help bolster up this deck. So just to sort of give this kind of like a preface, this is more or less a part 1. There will be a part 2 of this follow-up for this deck come July, or rather mid-July, when the other cards do come out. Moving on to the other 2 cards that we have, we're running a 2-set of Fortune Lady Fire. You don't want to run 3 of her because she can kind of be a dead draw, and you don't want to have 1 because you can probably always summon both of them from your deck every duel. She is your safety net, again, very similar to Alvis. Granted, her effect is that she again gains 200 for each star she has, so she comes out with 400 attack, gains a star every standby phase. When she is special summoned by the effect of a Fortune Lady card, so this includes Fortune Lady Light, and it will also include Fortune Lady Dark, and some other spells and traps as well. When she's special summoned in attack position, you get to target 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy it, and then they take damage equal to that monster's effect. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a card that's coming out in a later set that will allow you to special summon Fortune Lady straight from your deck if you control one, and her effect does activate on response to that card. So just keep that in mind when you guys are sort of building this deck. The recording of this is in June. After July, all of the cards will come out to make this deck a lot more powerful, but right now it's a little bit slower than it needs to be. But that doesn't mean that it's not as fun. Moving on to the next card, we're playing 1 Fortune Lady Water. We only need 1 of her. She allows you to draw 2 cards when she's special summoned and you control another Fortune Lady monster. So she can be special summoned by Monster Reborn, other cards effects, so on and so forth. She gains 300 for each star she has, and she gains a star each turn, so she's coming out with 1200 attack points. Again, she's really just used just for that extra draw power. Nothing more than that, other than her being like another spellcaster. And finally, of course, well, not necessarily finally for the monsters, but finally for the Fortune Lady monsters, we're running 3 Fortune Lady Darks. Gains 400 for each star she has, so she'll be coming out with 2,000 attack points. She's kind of going to be the second, if not main card you're summoning with Light's effect. When she attacks, or rather while she's on the field, and a Fortune Lady monster destroys another monster by battle, she allows you to special summon 1 Fortune Lady from your graveyard. And that's not a once per turn. That basically means that if you have her, or if you have multiples of her on the field, and let's say you have Water on the field as well, if Water destroys a monster while Dark is on the field, Dark still allows you to special summon another Fortune Lady from your graveyard. Primarily, you want to have Water in your grave, but it also works for special summoning Fire because she can use her effect, and again, just for the extra type of power that you're going to need. You can also set up really good Link summoning combos as well. Moving on to the next card, we have 2 Necrofaces. Necroface is really going to be in here because you are going to be banishing a lot of cards, and there really aren't that many good ways to get your cards back, with certain exceptions, Necroface being one of them. When she's summoned, she allows you to basically return all your remove from play cards back into your deck, for both players actually, and you draw, she gains 100 attack for each card returned. Now, when she's banished, you and your opponent have to banish the top 5 cards from your deck, which also kind of sets up a very good sort of duality. So she can be used as a very helpful setup card for you. There really is no penalty for you banishing your cards. There are a lot of cards in this deck that will get them back, but for the main point, if you banish one of your opponent's cards, you might end up choosing or getting one of the cards that they might need, whether it be an Ash Blossom, a Ghost Ogre, so on and so forth. And finally, moving on to the last card that we have in the deck, 1 Chaos Sorcerer. I do recommend running him on and off. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of other cards that will be coming out, and he's actually going to be sided out for one of those cards. There is a Fortune Lady Tuner that is going to be coming out soon, along with a Synchro, and that's what I'm going to side him out for. But as it stands, there are a multitude of light and dark monsters. The only other attributes that we're running are the 2 fires and the water. Also, Dverg, or Dwarf of the Nordic Alfar, is an Earth type, so you're not really going to get a lot of sort of use out of him, which is why I do say run him at 1. But like I mentioned, you can switch him out for anything that might be useful, whether it be Effect Veiler, Eater of Millions, Ash Blossom, so on and so forth. He's really just here kind of as like a one-off, I might use him once in a while, but don't really rely on Chaos Sorcerer. If you don't know what he does, he banishes a card once per turn, and he can't attack the turn that he does it. Moving on to the first spell card, we run 1 Gold Sarcophagus. This is mainly to set up for Necroface. You banish Necroface with Gold Sarc. they end up losing 5 cards, and then you get Necroface back, summon it, and then you basically have this card gain 1,000 attack. So it'll be coming out with 2,200 at the end of 2 turns, or rather by 2 turns. Next you have Dark Hole. Dark Hole is pretty self-explanatory, destroys all monsters on the field, can also be used to trigger Light's effect. 1 reinforcement of the army, you're running that mainly to search out your Diverg. You got 1 Monster Reborn, don't really need to explain this card, unless you're really new to Yu-Gi-Oh! 1 Twin Twister, just because, you do need that back row destruction. 1 Burial from the Different Dimension to return the cards to your graveyard that are banished, and this is again to set up really for your synchros. You're going to be running 2 Fortune's Futures. This allows you to return 1 Fortune Lady monster that's been banished back to your graveyard, and then you draw 2 cards. So really good draw power, and it can be played off of the field spell. You're running 2 Terraformings until it gets released at 3. You're going to keep this card at 2. It allows you to get any, basically any field spell from your deck to your hand. And then finally, you're running 3 copies of Future Visions. I think in a future format, I think in a format coming later, I'm probably going to reduce it down to 2, mainly because you don't necessarily want this card to be a dead draw in your hand. And it is really, like, it's kind of a one-off. I would recommend taking 1 out and maybe adding another Twin Twister. The one problem that I do say that this deck does have is back row destruction. Granted, you don't necessarily have to worry about that much with Odin and Loki, but just in case, there are some cards that might work in your opponent's favor that aren't necessarily destruction-based cards. And this deck, again, it does technically have a problem with back row destruction. Moving on to the first 2 traps. Now, we're only running 5 traps because if anyone knows me, I think traps are kind of garbage, and if you're not running anything other than, I guess, Infinite Impertinence or Royal Decree, then you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. But I do have a soft spot for Magic Cylinder, so we are going to be running 2 of them. Negate your opponent's monster attack. They take the damage directly. It's kind of like one of those cards that you rarely see anymore, so when folks run into it, they're just like, oh crap, I just kind of set myself up. You're running 1 Bottomless. Again, kind of going to be switching most of these cards out because, again, traps are garbage, and unless you're running Royal Decree, there really is no point in running a trap. Actually, sorry, you're running 2 Bottomless trap holes. Holy crap. I didn't realize I had 2 of them. And then finally, 1 Mirror Force. Now, to go into the extra deck, we're going to explain some of the monsters. You're running 2 Gulveg. I've seen people run this card at 3. My theory around this is that you definitely don't need more, and I will let the camera focus. You definitely don't need more than 2. If you're not winning the duel by summoning 1 of them, you really just have another one for backup, and if the second one gets killed by that time, then you're kind of just up a creek without a paddle. So again, when this card is link summoned, it allows you to banish 3 cards from either your hand or field. You can then special summon 3 Nordic monsters from your deck. Most likely you're going to be summoning Vanadis, Alvis, and Diverg, or you can go for Savaltov, Alvis, and Diverg, and then you're going to you're going to synchro summon for either Odin or Loki. While she's summoned and on the field, in regards to where her arrow is pointing to, if an Aesir monster is in that location, then that Aesir monster can't be targeted by card effects, and then while there's an Aesir monster on the field, she can't be targeted by attacks. So they kind of protect each other. Again, you're really only going to need 2 of them. You don't need more than that. Any more, then you're kind of like just really taking up a spot in your link summon, or rather in your extra deck. We're running 1 Daybreaker, the Shining Magical Warrior. Just for spellcasters. He really is only there for spellcasters. When he's summoned, he gets a spell counter. He's basically Breaker, with the exception that he can destroy 1 card, and he gains a spell counter each time a spellcaster is summoned into one of his arrow zones, or rather wherever one of his arrows point to. So he immediately is starting off with 19. He can be boosted up to 21. But you're not really going to be using anything more than his main effect. First synchro, we're running 1 Catastor because Catastor is still useful, and it destroys any monster immediately that's not a dark type. Running 1 Black Rose, just, for field removal. Black Rose always is a good card to kind of have. Running one Bryanak because he's off the list now, and returning cards back to your opponent's hand is better than sometimes destroying them. We're going to run one Colossal Fighter. Now again, out of all of the synchros I'm showing you, most of these might be replaced for some other cards. I definitely want to run a few other Exceeds and another sort of set of synchros. There is going to be a Fortune Lady synchro monster that is coming out that will be sided into the deck. But again, Colossal Fighter is actually really good just because you might be running into warrior-based decks. He does gain 100 attack for each warrior in both graveyards, and when he's destroyed by battle, you can special summon a warrior monster from either player's graveyard, including himself. So he is good for that type of setup. Running one Scrap Dragon just for, again, destruction effects, and because Scrap Dragon can also save you if you're in a bind. You're running one Red Dragon Archfiend because a lot of people like to play monsters in defense mode, and he kind of just destroys all of them. No Stardust, but you are going to run one Slacker Magician, mainly because she is a 1-star. You can go into her with Diverg, or you can go into her with Fortune Lady Light. I will say that you might want to switch her out for Link Karibo if you do have it, but she does protect herself from being destroyed, and you can remove one of the one of her Exceed materials if she were to be destroyed by a card effect once per turn. Up to the first two Nordic, sort of, I guess, Aesir synchros, we're going to be running two Lokis because you kind of do need two of them. They were the main card, and I did run them at 3, but when I put Vanadis in, I decided to reduce the number down just to add in the other ones. When Loki attacks, he can negate the effect of one spell or trap card that's activated during the battle phase. When he's destroyed, you're going to basically remove from play a Nordic Alfar tuner to bring him back, and when he's brought back, you get to add one trap card to your hand. Again, for the most part, we're probably not going to be using that last effect because, again, this deck doesn't really rely on that many traps. You're going to be running one Thor. Now, I was kind of on the fence about putting him in the deck. I really felt as if the deck didn't need Loki, Thor, and Odin. I thought it would have worked fine with Loki by himself. But then I realized, okay, Odin is actually a little bit more useful, plus he has a better effect. But for Thor, I will say I have gotten into a few situational duels where his effect does technically come in handy. He's the only Aesir monster that you're not going to be able to get back if he is destroyed by battle, unless you have Monster Reborn. But while he's on the field, you can use his effect to negate the effects of all other monsters on your opponent's side of the field. And then, of course, he has 3,500 attack points. If he is brought back, if you are going to side in a Nordic Beast Tuner, then when he is brought back by banishing that Nordic Beast Tuner, you get to inflict 800 damage to your opponent. And then finally, we're running two Odins, 4,000 attack. You're summoning him first turn. If you're not, then you're setting up for something with Fortune Ladies. But his effect is that once per turn, he can activate it and make himself unaffected by the effects of spells and traps. And then just kind of just run crazy. And if he does get removed, then you are depending on Alvis to summon another Loki, or you're just going to bring him back at the end of the turn by sending Vanadis. Now, I am going to go over a little bit of a combo, just because I do feel as if when folks are creating their decks, they don't necessarily go into how it works or how essentially you're going to want to use most of the cards in it. And because, again, this is more of a dual engine deck, it is going to be important for you to understand that there are multiple combos that you can go into. So if you're setting up with a hand that looks kind of like, well, let's see, in fact, if you're setting up with a hand that kind of looks like this, let's say we have one spell, let's put a trap in there, and then we're also going to add we'll add another trap. All right, so let's say, hypothetically, we're going to start with a hand that has one Nordic monster or one or more Nordic monsters that are under level 5, and then you have 3 other cards. All right, so essentially what you're going to want to do is either always have Diverg or Alvis in your hand immediately. You can also do this with Vanadis, but you're going to summon Diverg first, you're going to send him to the grave, and then immediately when you do that, you're going to bring out Gulveg. Now, when Golveg is summoned, if her effect does not get negated, if your opponent is not running Ash Blossom for some strange reason, then you're immediately going to get out your first sort of Nordic synchro. So you're going to summon her, you're going to use her effect. Immediately, you're going to banish any card in any 3 cards in your hand. And at this point, it doesn't necessarily matter. If they are Fortune Lady cards, they are much better to banish. But if you end up not getting Fortune Lady cards when you first have your hand, then don't worry about it too much. So you're going to banish 3 cards, any 3 that you choose. And then you're going to special summon 3 Nordic monsters from your deck. Ooh, excuse me, I'm moving the camera. You're going to special summon 3 Nordic monsters from your deck in defense position. Now, essentially, you're going to want to go for Vanadis, Alvis, and Deverg. And I'm actually going to move these cards down a bit. You're going to want to go for these 3. If, however, Vanadis is already in the grave or she's been banished for Golveg's effect, then immediately go into Svartalfheim just to sort of switch them out. Now, from there, you're going to sync, or you're going to activate Vanadis' effect. Send 1 Svartalfheim to the grave, so that way she becomes a 5-star. You're going to sync with all 3 of them, and summon Odin. Now, this combo essentially is going to leave you with 1 card in your hand. However, you do have a 4,000 attack points monster that can't be targeted by card effects thanks to Golveg. You have Golveg, who here can't be attacked because you do have your Odin here. Now, and if Odin gets removed, you essentially already have 1 Alvis in the grave. I'll let the camera focus. You have 1 Alvis in the grave and 1 Vanadis. So immediately when Odin leaves the field, you're removing from play Alvis to summon either Loki or Thor. And then at the end of the turn, you're going to remove from play Vanadis to bring back Odin. So essentially, it's kind of a bait and switch. You want them to kind of force their hand to get rid of Odin. If they do, then you're immediately going to summon him back next turn, and you're going to have at least 7,300 attacks on the field. Now, if you're running anything aside from that, if you open up with a hand that doesn't have that, luckily enough, you do have Fortune Ladies in here. So the chances of you getting Deverg to your hand are fairly easy. If you don't run him, if you're not getting him, then you can always wait until you get him by just setting up with Future Visions. This card does help by slowing down the game. It will prevent your opponent from normal summoning as fast as they want to. You can also Gold Sark into Necroface, like I mentioned before, and then just immediately slow their deck down by removing from play one of the cards that they might need. But again, your Fortune Lady engine is there to back up your Nordics if they are running a bit slow. But in all of the decks, or rather in all of the games that I've played, I'm usually drawing at least 1 or 2 Alvises and 1 or 2 Devergs. You also have the Reinforcement of the Army to get your Deverg back to your hand if you essentially need the card, if you essentially need it to summon the card that you're going to want. So overall, I think Alvis technically makes this deck a lot more useful. I do feel that, again, Nordics as a whole still, while they are useful, their main problem to me is the whole back row thing. And if you are running into an opponent and you don't necessarily have Odin on the field already, then Loki's kind of going to be your one safeguard. But aside from that, I will say that one of the things that I might customize and try out with different versions of this deck is by working around cards that have more back row destruction. I do feel that Golveg and Alvis work together perfectly. I do feel that with this combination, you're allowed to go into a lot of other monsters. And if there are beast decks or fairy decks that work around banishing, then feel free to experiment with those and combining them with Nordics as well. But aside from that, this is kind of, again, a dual engine deck profile. I am going to be going over a few more deck profiles in the coming weeks. This is some new content for you guys, so just let me know if you would like to see more of this. And that aside, if you have any other questions, if you'd like to duel me on Dueling Nexus, you can find me on my Discord, which I will link here in the description below. But also, I will be making other videos, as I mentioned before, other Yu-Gi-Oh! Based videos, and updating this video or this deck when July comes around and those new cards come out. But aside from that, thank you guys for watching. I have been the Artist with a Fro. That, my friends, is the show, and I will see you all next time.